what you're saying is there is human trafficking at Walt Disney World property in Orlando, Florida.
Yes, there's a very big possibility, especially since they went through the court systems and find out certain employees that had to deal with that in other correlated events. There is a very big possibility that that could be one of the openings up into that. Disney doesn't have to be a scare tactic. Disney has to be something that could be manually put on a good term for humankind. And I'm not just talking about trafficking. There are movies coming out there, and even movies that are not good for kids' eyes, ears, and thought forms. The progression node of Disney itself needs to be played on a good vital role for the masses. That is just one of two terms they need to have set into fix.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 44. Blue, how are you?
I'm good today, Mike.
Excellent. Hey, we're going to have a huge show today in 44. What are we going to talk about today?
One of the things we'll be discussing about is Disney World and the utilidors. What goes on underneath the subsystem itself in Disney World? People have heard of so-called trafficking. Others have heard of ways to motivate in between the scenarios. But why was trafficking added to this certain scenario? And what recently is going on that's making this enclosure more elevated than normal?
Wow. You know, I've lived in Florida for a long time. I worked on Disney property for a few years, 2 different episodes, so I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what you're talking about in the same respect, so I'm very interested to dive in here. Hey, before we get going here, please make sure you click on like, subscribe, click on notifications too, so you're notified when we post new material. Blue, let's go ahead and get right into it.
A certain called human trafficking operations that have been going on, and the affiliations that go on and circulate with them in underground systems. There are several networks that can withstand this, and just one of them in certain tunnelized systems underground, including Disney itself, has circulated subsystems that help with this. And there are actually employees that work with Disney itself that help with this trafficking. They have dealt with recent courts that had correlated with this. Disney employees among 200 arrested in human trafficking operations itself. And the others, this is about 5 months ago, and other substandards that they had dealt with. And you can think about with Ron DeSantis and their current fightings between them and that corporation. There is a normal stance that goes in the utilidors for Disney. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I mean, it's good for the families and kid units to be in certain places and have fun. They have the normal stance for it. They have the normal employees. They're disguised, obviously. Not many know what their real face looks like. They hide that. It's a lot of this is enclosed. A lot of this is kept secret, what they do up underneath the feet that goes up from up top. Some of these have laboratories, if you will, and some of these have products and move, encapsulate certain people underneath. They do have the normal stance. They have the costume networks. They have those that go with the normalcies of the program, their own cafeterias, their own eateries, their own places where they maybe could camp out at from underneath, of what humans would understand. But this other end of the deal with certain corporations that may be corralled with this, and there's still maybe networks underneath here that are not open and aware to the public. that need to be looked into a little bit deeper. If we want safety for mankind, we want safety for families, then we got to program Disney outwards as a safety net and not as something that's going to scare the masses. And if this is a possibility and these systems are not being checked on and they are hiding things, then it needs to be stopped or turned over into a better timetable. So that way we are not dealing with one of many other organizations that could possibly have a traffic control.
You know, it's amazing to me because I lived in the Northeast United States. We came down to Florida on vacation when I was a child. I had relatives that lived here, so the family decided to relocate. So without giving away too much of my age, but in the late 70s, early 80s, I visited Disney World as a child, and I had heard about these underground tunnels and stuff, and I thought, yeah, whatever, that's fact. Can you imagine? I'm walking around this place going, this place is huge. There's no way they have a tunnel system under here. And I'm a kid. I don't know any better. I just blew it off. And then after relocating to Florida and visiting Disney World several times, and by the way, Disney has been a great economic boom for Florida. It's spurred up some surrounding attractions. You have Universal, you have SeaWorld, you have all these great things, and these mom and pops and small businesses, and now large corporations have moved in, and Disney has expanded, and there's no state income tax in Florida because of some of the tourist development, tourist taxes. So I'm all for that stuff. What I'm not for is what you're talking about. Now, later on, I was employed by Disney, and then later on, I was employed by an outside contractor. I did business on Disney property. So I was privy to these tunnels under the Magic Kingdom, but I'm sure there are other areas that are tunnelized in that central location that I wasn't privy to, that I couldn't get to for some reason. And then it opens up the idea of, they say there's no tunnels at Epcot or the Hollywood Studios, used to be called MGM Studios. They say that there's no tunnelized systems. That's a crock, because I've been over in it at the when it was MGM, back when it opened. I did some commercial shooting back in the day, and you can look for me on the 1994 Chevrolet Lumina commercial, by the way. But I was underground at the Hollywood Studios where there's no underground tunnel. So I like the engagement DeSantis has had in the state, because while he can't come out and confront them with these allegations, you know, the number one way to hit somebody is in the pocketbook. And that's what he did. He took away the freedom they had with no taxes. They had their own city there. They can make their own rules. They had their own police type department. They had their own fire type department. So they can make the rules. They can put certain areas off limits. So I'm open to what you're talking about here. I personally didn't witness it. Is it plausible? Absolutely. Is it probable? It sounds like you came with both barrels loaded today. So I just want to be clear. What you're saying is there is human trafficking at Walt Disney World property in Orlando, Florida.
Yes, there's a very big possibility, especially since they went through the court systems and find out certain employees that had to deal with that in other correlated events. There is a very big possibility that that could be one of the openings up into that. Disney doesn't have to be a scare tactic. Disney has to be something that could be manually put on a good term for humankind. And I'm not just talking about trafficking. There are movies coming out there, and even movies that are not good for kids' eyes, ears, and thought forms. The progression node of Disney itself needs to be played on a good vital role for the masses. That is just one of two terms they need to have set into fix.
You know, it's crazy because in these days with the border crisis that we have in this country, something and a little off topic, but in the same general area here, I recently learned not long ago that these organizations, they're called NGOs. These are privatized organizations like the Red Cross and Catholic Charities. And I'm just giving those as ideas. I'm not saying that those are directly responsible for human trafficking. But what I will tell you is there are NGOs that are responsible for human trafficking. We're witnessing at the border one of the largest human trafficking operations ever conducted in recorded history. And guess where the NGOs get their money? They take some donations to make it look good on the front side. But do you know where all their funding comes from? It's like when you do taxes, folks, and you turn in your receipts for expenses on your tax report and you balance with the government. NGOs get 100% reimbursement from the federal government. Do you know what organization does that? FEMA. So FEMA is using your tax dollars to fund human trafficking at the border. And now we're learning that Walt Disney World is a conduit for that as well. This is insane. Over 80,000 undocumented children have been dispersed without their families in the United States, and we have no idea where they are. We don't even know who most of them are. This is crazy. You tell a kid from a foreign country that has to be separated from his parents for some reason that they can go to Disney World. What kid's not going to light up and do that? They go to Disney World and Lord knows what happens after that. Now, we may be in a lot of trouble for this video here, folks. And if it gets taken down soon, I'm sorry, look on our other platforms that we use Rumble as well. Rumble's taken off big time for us. So YouTube, if you want to continue to give me problems, you can kiss my butt. You know what I'm saying? So this, I'm sorry, Blue, but this just fires me up. This is a place right down the road for me. And I'm the type of person that I like to have an impact. I'm not necessarily a boots on the ground guy, but I do like to make sure that the messages are heard, that the correct people are getting the correct information, and not the bull crap you see on news. Taking a deep breath here, Blue. I don't mean to chuckle. I get so fired up over this. Is there anything that we can do as a normal Floridian, as a normal citizen in the United States, to put a dent in this, to stop this, to slow this down?
Well, the mass trafficking scene that corrals through the entire planet needs to be decommissioned, and those that do and justify on the lawful, on unlawful standard need to be either put up in jail or re-rectified from their own unreasonings. It's got to be put at a stop altogether. It's not just one designation code. This is being corralled everywhere. Enough is enough. Humans are not aware of what goes up underneath their feet. Disney, yes, it does have a lot of good vital roles. There's a lot of things that could happen good there. But that, amongst many other conjunctures, even museums, whatever, need to be on safety nets and start learning to distribute that safety net. So, and get these people that cause the problems from these corporations out.
So we've talked about this in the past with the giant forces of a good versus evil and the deep state and so forth. Just to clear everything up. And folks, this is a great reminder for us. If you ever hear us talking about things, we say, oh, we talked about this in the past. You can go back through our videos and look at the theme or look at the topic and click on the stamp, the time stamp right next to that episode, and it'll take you right to that topic. So please go back and explore some previous videos. I do that all the time for research myself here. But I just want to make it clear to people that are watching this. We're saying that these are some of the entities that are involved in this process, the deep state, the evil forces, and these can be on multiple dimensions and multiple types of beings as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, look at the music industry. There are a lot of beings coming out in the music industry now that didn't come out before, saying a lot of negative things out there. We need to pay attention. We got to stop this. This is not good for the mind.
And the thing that gets me is Disney's been one of those companies that have tried to normalize a lot of this type of activity. It's okay if you're a man to identify as a woman and dress like a woman, and it's okay to have, and you know what, I'm down with that. You want to do what you want to do, that's fine. What I'm not good with is Disney pushing this down my throat, and what I'm really not good with is Disney pushing this down kids' throats. Pardon the pun, but that is exactly what's happening. They have these little drops. People, for years, you can go back and if you have old copies of like old VHS of movies from Disney, cartoon movies, you can stop them at certain points and see penises. You can see fornication. You can see all these things on children's cartoons produced by Disney. This is not something I take lightly. This is not something I'm saying just to say it, folks. This is real. This is documented. Continue to follow with us for more on this in the future here. And Blue, I'm sorry, I don't want time to get away from us. Yeah, well, I know you had mentioned something about interdimensional Nexus loopholes.
Yes, NX-17, Boring, Oregon, and has to do with Located in Alkema County, Oregon, 12 miles southeast of Portland, 14 miles southeast of Oregon City, named after William H. Boring, who was a Union soldier who settled in modern Boring in 1856 before Oregon became a state. Now, a certain articulated area had opened up Nexus loophole. This loophole had to deal with at headquarters, which is now called Wilson's Wildlife Solutions. It is considered a Briar-class nexus due to its properties of anomalous fauna in the place. So the anonymous fauna that come along are projected scenes of awareness and higher codes of beings or creatures that they come from another portal or dimension itself on to this current one. And you got to think about this. So this wildlife solution place, they categorize these beings and then they fundamentally put them out into the planet. If it's an exactation and it's okay, and there's certain fauna and or flora, because some of it is flora that goes into here. If it is okay and it does not harm human race or anything else, they have an acceptance term as a motivation and is now a part of this planet. These Nexus beings, this is not just the only place, with several other intake zones, and they could deal with elements as well. They can deal with some of the Nexus points to deal with beings or extraterrestrial entities, paranormal entities. Some of them have to do with buildings or objects or E-class objects coming into circulatory node. It's also considered an SCP. We talked about this before. There are several other location or nexus points. And this one is particular, just bringing in subspecies. We did diagnose before on several of our network shows how scientists have created subspecies in terms that some of them proactive from other dimensions. This is just another term of it, except this wasn't created by scientists. This was brought in. But there are another term of moving them into existence.
You know, when you brought this up, I must admit I'd never heard of a Nexus being before. So I did some other research here, and I want to point out 3 definitions that I found of Nexus beings, because I understand what you just said, but the one that affected me the most and the one that made me raise an eyebrow here is Nexus beings are, and this is according to fandom, so it must be true, it's on the internet.
Oh, this is different. Can I interject?
Yes.
Nexus beings, this is different from an NX-17. NX-17 is the location. But yeah, the actual Nexus being is a persons and or entities that can control and drastically control and affect the probability of the timeline itself and the dimension.
That's exactly the thing that killed me. I was like, all right, let me get this straight here. Does that mean, and I just want to be clear here, because we always talk about Elon Musk in the show, is Elon Musk...
I and a few others are. Yes, Elon Musk and a few other elites are Nexus beings. It's another way
chills.
To say that we can get controllers that can manually move things and variants into existence. How do you think Donald Trump knows so much about what goes on and what's going to happen? Think about this, people.
I've been thinking about that a while ago, and I'm gonna talk to you about this off camera here, because I decided to mention this to you. I found out about a week ago some vital information here, and I've been wanting to share it with you, but I know you and I have had other things going on here recently. But when we get done with this taping here, I'm going to partner with you for a minute, because don't let me forget, I have some huge news that will blow everybody away. So folks, let me tell you, after this show, 44, maybe on 45, it may be a special show. You're going to see and hear the announcement of a lifetime. You're going to gain information from us that you never thought was possible. You're going to hear some information from us that you thought, oh yeah, that's just made up. That's some conspiracy theory. I have facts. I have documentation. I have evidence that I'm going to discuss with Blue. This is going to take a little planning on how to put this out there, because again, we've talked about things in the past where if we came right out and just blurted it out in one sentence, your mind would be blown. You'd blow it off. So just like these deep state people, just like the actors, just like the things that are going on with the human trafficking that we opened the show with, they do things in small increments. They do it a little bit at a time. Think of the price of gas. The price of gas went up to $4 and something. It was $1.87 before Let's Go Brandon went in the office. Now it's at around 320 or so. And they're like, oh, we've brought down the price of gas. No, you haven't. It's still almost double. It's the same thing. They try to incrementally do it. They say, well, inflation's coming down. It's not coming down. It's just rising less. Those are not cumulative totals. Since Let's Go Brandon's been in the White House, what's happened? Things are up over 20% across the board. So when we talk about these things, please go back and catch up. We'll try to catch you up along. And Blue, I'm just so fired up. We haven't done a show in a little bit here. So please, are there any things that we can do, or are there any indicators we can be aware of when we identify a Nexus being?
Well, Nexus beings, we're just out there. You'll know the difference. Our energy intake zones, what we do and contain within the actual timelines of the multiverse itself and the dimensions that we deal with, and the corporate fundings that deal as well with certain zoning affairs in between the terms. So the conjunctions that go on with the defense departments and those that deal with more of the secret organizations affiliate with us beings. And more or less of a lot of the elites that went onto the programming stack quota terms of this actual dimension itself throughout the timelines were either a Nexus being or an inquired as a higher dimensional being that had to deal with and set anomalous effects of that perimeter. We are highly protected and we're highly monitored for what we deal with because it affects everything around us.
One more short follow-up on the Nexus beings here. This isn't something new. This is something that we know has gone back in history. So maybe mythical gods.
It's been around forever. It's been around forever.
Wow. I'm getting chills.
It's like the Nexus of all realities is not a being per se, and it's not buildings per se, but it's an extension of an endless maze that infinitely extends into all directions, containing infinite amounts of variants of electromagnetic field frequencies and bioluminescent streams that contain within the walls and fractals of the actual multiverse itself. The Nexus of all realities contains within the infinite amounts of realities that go in through the hyperdimensions and loopholes into an ultimated maze.
They can rewrite history, folks. They can not rewrite history. They can adjust history. History is written by the victors, okay? So if we continue to let this deep state be victorious, certain things are always going to be hidden away, and all we're going to get is repeated sound clips of what they tell us. What they tell us is always the opposite of what the reality is, if you notice that. It's always what they're doing, and they project that evil manner onto someone else while they're doing that same thing behind the scenes. And hopefully after these couple years of the Let's Go Brandon administration, you folks everyone will finally come around. And I think it's your duty as an American citizen and as a human being to let your friends and loved ones be aware of these things. However, some are going to be closed-minded. Some are not going to want to hear it. Some are not going to want to see it. I get it. And it's very frustrating. You know, it's not frustrating when we talk about the SCP Foundation. What SCPs do we have to talk about this week?
SCP 76, Able, which is considered a class Cater. Able consists of two components, a stone cube and a humanoid entity. Now, contained within that perimeter, within that cube. This cube is made of a speckled metamorphic stone. All surfaces outside and within are covered in deeply engraved patterns corresponding to unknown civilizations. Radioactive analysis indicates that the object is approximately 10,000 years old. The door is located on one side, sealed with a lock about 0.5 meters in width, surrounded by 20 smaller locks in a circular pattern. As if yet none of the keys have been found, making the door impossible to lock once closed. This poses a threat because what humans don't know, in this cube resides an entity, and this entity is like a godlike entity. There are good gods and goddesses and bad gods and goddesses, and then there are ones in between. This type of entity is considered a negative outsized effect because it is a kill switch mode. Once it sees any human and or humanoid, it will attack that human and or humanoid until it is dead Nothing is able to kill this entity once it is released. No physical conjuncture can kill it. There is a strand and formational code that the Foundation could possibly pose to getting rid of it. As far as we are concerned, and as higher beings ourselves, this type of being does not even need to exist. It should not even have been manually made into existence. It had a corporal funding as a conjuncture that had possibly proacted to scenes of events through scientists on other dimensions. And that locked up an event to this one. The only proactive way to get rid of this entity is to keep it locked up and find a key that could co-op with that type of cube. There are several types of keys that could co-op, but those dimensional keys do not run through the bioelementals that most humans have here on this earth. This entity is something that is watched very carefully, monitored very carefully, and either if you cannot neutralize it through the cube, humans will have to find a way to neurally neutralize it and shut it down through its mind core, not physically. It cannot be killed like that.
You know, and that brings me to the biblical reference here. Is this the same Abel from Genesis with Cain and Abel?
No. This is what humans consider some type of demonic entity. This is not the same thing.
And the reason why I naturally gravitate to that area is in the Bible, in Genesis, the Bible tells us that Cain had a mark, that God put a mark on Cain, so anyone that could identify him by that mark would know not to kill him or not to injure him. And I was just curious, does this being like Abel, is it stay away from certain entities, is it stay away from people, or is this harmful to us as regular people?
It's not like the biblical Abel. This is it's just humans named it this. Now, this is a different entity, and it will attack any human on sight and kill them. Just like that. That's what I'm saying. The only way to kill this thing is considered a threat on unimposable modes. And if it feels a threat from higher races, even for Zetas and other races and bystanders, and they're trying to help lower circuitry codes like this planet or others, it will attack them too.
Wow.
It has a self-reliance. It's a negative lower spherical event. There's some entities out there that are made and fabricated that way. And they're better either being kept locked up and learned about a bit more, or decommissioned, neutralized altogether.
Let's talk about one that's a little safer. Tell me about SCP-320.
All right. SCP-320, Higgs Field Acceleration Manipulator. Now, scientists and currency standards, just like we had talked about that nebula bud, the plant, before, and the light that goes with it. This is a small glass sphere which affects normal Euclidean space when accelerated along any line of motion. The ball of glass itself is just over 10.4 centimeters in diameter and just 31.2 grams, or 1.1 ounces. Like refraction experiments and compound tomography scans have proven that SCP-320 does contain a hollow vacuum, just like a vortex or a wormhole, if you will. No physical tests have been able to explain why SCP-320 reacts to space-time in the manner that it does. Now, with SCP-320, they have done numerous tests in the scene at the effect of the hypermolecular status code that goes because of its gravitational mass and the effect it portrays upon certain structures and matter, creates a huge dent upon the infrastructure itself. So with this tiny glass ball, you throw it, its radius will cause a major impact. And think about how they create hyper aerodynamic booms in certain fields of effects through manipulation, through military other agenda spheres. It's closer to that, but the molecule and the sound molecules that go there impact the actual matter around it and the mass. It could be caused as a good thing and create a loophole in the time-hole continuum that could possibly create a better field in the diameters that co-create these certain hyperstreams and defenses itself. And it can help create through the gravitational spheres and push and poles that go through the aerodynamics and the force fields that go through star units and reposition through the space foundations and the corporations that could possibly enact through that, creating solid barriers and force fields.
You know, we've always talked about how Hollywood and mainstream media are active participants in controlling messages, controlling information, and so forth. And this brings me back to Pokemon. You're familiar with Pokemon. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Pokemon. What did they have? They had that ball. And I'm not a huge Pokemon guy. My kid was, but you have this Pokemon ball, and that's the first thing that came to mind here, is because that affected and changed things when they threw that ball and they brought apart their entity or whatever it was, their character, whatever it was. Is this something that's contained? It's not a direct threat to us right now, right?
No, but it could be utilized as something that could be good. Think about putting this ball, throwing it, or throwing something up down into water. And then a gravitational pull, it creates a wave around there like a ripple. And then it goes down into the water and makes a hole. And that so-called hole could create a hyperloop effect and pull the gravitational frequencies outwards. So it can actually create a hole in the ground or a hypermolecule hole upon certain substructures. I mean, it could be a good way to utilize tunnels for water, or create an outer lining, a defense wall around certain perimeters of water, so you're getting underneath in certain areas. That's very possible. The fields that portray with this create a higher electromagnetic proactive screen and barrier that concubines with certain elements.
You know, you said the key word there, tunnels, and I go back to the first thing we talked about today. Do you think there's any correlation there? Maybe at one time this was used for a negative type thing.
No, it just creates more of a hole, if you will. Like a hole could go down into something that could be made into a tunnel, or the hole could create a loophole or a bio materialistic wave motion that could move the particles around it in a semi-motional way, mode of effect. So it pushes the particles outward.
Understood.
It has a gravitational pull or push on things.
Gotcha. Let's go on. Let's go on to SCP-59.
Radioactive material. Now, the radioactive material itself is a mineral of unknown origin, superficially resembling a shell-like. A component of SCP-59 is believed to originate in an alternate universe, alternate dimension, and its properties are anomalous. So it's responsible for an addition to alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. This specimen produces a previously unknown type of radiation, apparently unique to the object and their class itself, and it is designed to create a radioactive component that partially contains to standard shielding interface. This type of radioactive component, once it hits certain infected beings, it creates a layer of molecules in the skin itself. And those infected become immune to the effects of ionization radiation, but progressively merge with SCP-51 or 59, and eventually have all tissues replaced by fungal growth. This type of fungal growth, because it's circulated to that type of radiation, it does not harm the beings that are directly intact with it. But it makes them non-violent. They do not appear to be directly contagious with others into that. But the ones with long-term exposure have not been adequately tested or considered a biohazard as well, outwards. The infected individual is still capable of communication, describes seeing a world entirely covered with SCP-59, where much of the surface is composed of this fungi. It is unclear whether this is a hallucination or a view into the source of the SCP itself. Infectees are generally pleased with their condition and often refer to being in the blue light of heaven. This is an alternated dimension that motivates into this current dimension. And certain specification codes that enact with this can affect certain individuals itself.
So is this SCP-59, is this something dangerous to us?
Yes, it's considered Cater because it's the announced event of the particles in it, because it has a proactive scene in an alternate dimension through the mind code, and the fact that it creates layers of a type of fungi that is unknown, and its perimeter is higher elevated through nuclear material. It would be considered a higher radioactivity event, and that is not something that wants to be incubed through a certain dimension unless they know what exactly it is and what it would do. It will be considered a threat if not controlled.
You know, on a side here, I do consider myself kind of closely tied to SCP-59. I consider myself a fun guy. All right, sorry about that, folks. Anything to report from the Space Force in your position with the Federation?
Yes, the Space Force and SpaceX, the ties that deal in the so-called program, a satellite program, Starshield, national security, that's deepening within intelligence, the U.S., and the military agencies to moving and winning at least one major classified contract and expanding its services outwards. So this is a good thing for a proactive screen and layer of protection for mankind, and following up to maintaining better codes of ethics, what needs to be stabilized for the next generation. Between SIOP affairs and military affairs, agenda speed that deal with the electromagnetic fields, priority fields of what's going on and above the actual hemisphere itself, and the proactive scenes of what could be dealt with the next communication codes of effect. And another thing is, a lot of the phones just recently, from what I've been heard, have been messed up. So this is another thing that needs to be taken into effect and taken into consideration, that we may be proactively moving something into the next communicated barrier for mankind. Quantum financial system could also be in tune for this, as well as the stability for a telepathic and neural wavelengths for maintaining the next better code of ethics.
It's amazing to me because there's certain large corporate giants or corporate entities or certain people that always seem to be on the forefront of anything. And let me just give you two small examples. One is just yesterday, I'm watching regular TV programming, which I try not to do, but I'm watching it and there's a commercial for a new Apple iPhone. And there's a guy stuck in the desert in his vehicle, and he's bottomed out and he's stuck and he can't get a signal. They have a button now that you can push on your phone and it'll detect the nearest satellite and then go to that satellite network. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's finally happening. Then the same day, yesterday, I read something about Elon Musk and something called Starshield. Is this kind of what you're talking about here?
Yes, motivating more protective screen layers for mankind. Starlink, Starshield, defense area, moving. I mean, the satellites, what humans don't understand is that they're getting hit in back of defense with the satellites as well. There are wars that could be played out and are being played out behind the scenes that could affect your everyday way of life. That's got to be protected. So yes, certain organizations have a way to effectively protect that. So we're not getting hit back on a native conjuncture scene.
You know, and
communication is becoming more broad out there for people. It's becoming something of a standard for society, but it has to be on a good elevated standard.
Something we've talked about and followed along in the past was with the revelations of Q the past several years. And of course, one of the things, I don't have it in front of me, I don't have the post in front of me, but is calling for a communication blackout. Now there's threats now that we could receive this before or around election time. How about that? You can't get to the voting booth. Don't worry, we'll take care of it all by mail. We'll take care of it all by computer, electronically. Sure, folks. That's what we witnessed again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Do you think that blackout that we had with largely AT&T/T-Mobile people, but it affected a lot of people, do you think that was like a test, a warm-up of such to what we're talking about now, that there could be a further communication blackout, whether it's a cyber attack or internet something or another?
No, it's one of two reasons. One, it's a motivational scene that a lot of the circuits that are going on in communications are being redacted and moved into the next agenda, which moves into the stability system of the communications for the next stage. But there also can be proactive defenses that are being played out behind the scenes that are being hit by communicated barriers. And it could be hit by phone services and other agenda speeds that people are not aware of from other companies or from other proactive militaries that are not on the good terms of service. Now, this and what would go and happen for mankind, for the better generation, has to be proactive to what's being stabilized through their communications itself. This is only a knockout of two things. Proactive, there could have been a military agenda speed going on, something coming up that could electromagnetically diffuse a lot of the perimeters around the lands, but as well as motivating the next field of effect at what needs to be placed out. So it's one of two things. It could be a negative thing and a positive outlet.
You know, when the authorities get involved with a crime or a case like that, one of the tools they use is triangulating phone lines. So they can tell by the towers where you were. They can triangulate your position. I'm fearing that we're triangulating a position that everyone can see with their eyes. We've heard it with evidence from Q. We've heard it now with evidence from the Space Force and the Federation. We saw it in this past couple weeks here with the downed cell phone thing we just talked about. And then in the weeks prior, we heard about the Russians being able to shoot down our satellites. A member of Congress that explored this through the intelligence community. He alerted the media. He alerted people. And then the Let's Go Brandon administration came out and said, oh, no, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. I'm way confused here because usually it's always the opposite of what this administration tells us. So if they're telling us not to worry, I'm worried. Should I be worried?
No, because this is one of the things that are being manually put and set into place for mankind. What really needs to be worried and set out there is what certain administrations are being vitally placed. We don't need a commissionary status code where we're fighting against each other consistently. We need to motivate for a next stage itinerary code, and that cannot be placed out unless the certain enablers are placing it on a proactive scene. And this goes into one other company or several other companies on a good term called the ESA, or the European Space Agencies, or the Space Enablers, that proact with other agencies to help analyze, generate, and put things into advanced systems. And we're talking about hypercellular generation, advanced robotics, Stargate, quantum stability systems, communications, the Starlink format, maintaining the next generational modes. This and the proactive scenes of the communications that should be placed out are one of the main motivators that need to be placed into a good administration, a more standard administration. If we can get rid of the negative currency standards that are being placed between two administrations, and I'm going to be honest with you, the Trump administration and the Biden administrations have proactive scenes, and then they have active scenes. The proactive scenes could be either diminished or acted upon a good or bad conjuncture. And then the active ones are our current stance. We need an in-between. We need a control of a side that would coordinate forward, not backward between two motivators. And I guarantee you, with Kamala Harris and the way that she's moving things forward, especially with the ballots and unauthorized agenda speeds that are corralizing into the country, and let's just say it, undocumented immigrants, and trying to make them documented so that way there's no way to motivate things for the Republican side. This is an unfair situation on both ends. The justification process has to enable for a space age, enable for something in between. And if the Democrats win this race, for shame on them. And if the Republicans want to keep fighting back, for shame on them too. We got to make a stand down perimeter and fight for our rights of life, and fight to what is made right. Otherwise, humans will not get what was brought from them from the higher beings.
Wow. Well,
cooperation needs to be taken into place. Cooperation, I'm telling you right now.
Well, there you go, folks. Straight from the Space Force and the Federation. Hey, let's get right into our ET of the week.
Yes, the Tundra TeraFoi, corporeal cold climate entities that exist between the DNA structures of a Yeti, humanoid, and semi-conscious bark-like structure itself. Now, if you think about Groot to Guardians of the Galaxy, they kind of have a similar homology biological effect to them, and has a similar homology biological entity effect to a Yeti, a Sasquatch, or the colder climates. And believe it or not, it is sub-analytical effect to it. It's humanoid as well. Sub-analyzed analog effects corporal dimension sciences examine the exact terms that can be cast out, symbiote terms of cost between species, and combine another parallel exchange in between costs of combined hybridization programs. Hybridization programs submitted this and several other intake zones that humans have pushed into the effect through the dimensions. We're talking about rakes. We talked about them before. Rakes. The extraterrestrial entities look human, bald, pinkish. There are a lot of them in Florida, underground. They were sub-analyzed and made through scientists' exaptations. These are similar.
You know, one of the things. Go ahead.
Pardon?
I was just going to say one of the pictures you had sent reminded me of that character Groot from that movie.
Yes, that's what I stated. Yes, in Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're parallel combining another exchange in between costs of combined hybridization. Yes, such programs push some terms of space movies ideas into reality like that. So some of these space movies and some of these other movies, even including Men in Black, talked about it before. Such beings are real. That they just push this into that term.
It's amazing because they're dripping it out like we've talked about in the past. Hollywood has an active part in this and dripping it out, because if they came right out with it and said it years ago that this is reality and this is reality and this is reality, people's heads would explode. Nobody would understand it. There'd be mass chaos. People would be on their last leg here as humanity. Are we saying though that this is something that's a harmful being to us? If I run into one of these, this could be harmful to me?
Well, there's more to say. Like, if imposing upon their domain, they will attempt attack if threatened. Just like any certain other hyper-neural species that have a more combined status code. Small civilizations are possible with these entities. But knowing to do so, if inclined to preserve their own, they will go into a self-functioning hybridization mode. They will hibernate. They will stand in one spot, thus ceasing activities upon periods of time. Limbs have the abilities to break off and reproduce if necessary. And there are animals here currently that exist here in this land that do that. There's sharks, they lose their teeth, they remodulate it. There are other entities. I mean, there are lizards that can do that too. They'll lose their tails, it will regrow. So, but I'm going to be honest with you, this type of existing being may have been proactively helped and assisted into fabrication by scientists.
And that's not unfathomable to me. Again, I was just thinking the same thing. This sounds like a lab creation. Do we think that these beings can be used for our good in any way?
There was something that was sub-analytically made, and it needs to be preserved, and maybe a notion better and an understanding. And yes, there have been breakouts of them, but there are not many of these species. And like I said, they in turn like to corral with their own subspecies and stay to their own. Don't really want to hang around mankind much. And I guess I wouldn't blame you if they are part Sasquatch, because a lot of Sasquatch used to live amongst mankind, Native American Indians. We talked about this before. But they tend to stay away from humankind nowadays. Well, we wouldn't blame them. Mankind's become way too perverse in their ways. They become too negative, if you will. And that's not going to proactively go well with other entities and other dimensions and other planets. We got to find a way to be proactive again, the way we were, the way we used to be.
There you have it, folks. Straight from Blue, our ET of the week. Blue, what an action-packed show today. I got very emotional today. Sorry about that, but at the same time with good cause here. Thank you for an exciting 44. And folks, stand by and follow us. Click like, subscribe, click on notifications, because if you're listening to this, you're going to want to listen to the next show as well. Trust me. 45 is going to be huge. Wow, where have I heard about 45 before? Blue, thank you for an episode 44, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks, everybody.